One quiet evening in May of 2024, the Mitchell family sat down together for dinner in their modest apartment on the outskirts of Philadelphia. Margaret Mitchell, now 78, turned to her granddaughter with a gentle, almost absent-minded question. "Sweetheart, is that $100 I send you every month still covering what you need for school?" Her words floated over the table, light and simple. But as soon as she finished, a palpable, chilly silence draped itself around the family. There was nothing particularly strange about her question, and yet, it was as if, behind those words, an invisible crack in the family's foundation was slowly, but surely beginning to show, a rift named betrayal. Margaret had lived for the past 20 years in the same old apartment complex, tucked into a corner of a city neighborhood that was once vibrant, now just a little quieter and a little older each year. Ever since her husband, John, had passed away, Margaret had kept to her careful routines: rise with the sun, pause at the small shelf where she kept John's photograph, whisper a little good morning to him, and begin a day marked by all the calm habits that had steadied her life for decades. She always brewed a fresh cup of coffee, sat for a moment by her window, and collected her thoughts before starting her day. "John, make sure you keep an eye on us today," she'd say with a soft voice to the photo. "Eee." Feeling the memory of his laugh echo just behind the glass. The bitterness from the day he was gone, the visceral cold and the deep ache of loneliness, had never really left. Yet, life kept moving, urging her to find strength in small things. That resilience, quietly built over the years, had helped Margaret shape a world where she felt steady, if not young, then at least unshaken. These days, Margaret lived almost solely on her government pension, about $800 a month. She didn't complain. "Truth be told, I don't need much at this age," she'd often say with a gentle smile, her eyes crinkling with the pride of a long, well-lived life. "All I really want is to keep my health, and maybe a bit of peace. That's enough." But there was one ritual that she never forgot. Every month, without fail, she'd stop by her local bank and wire $100 to her only granddaughter, Emily. It was hardly a fortune, but for Margaret, it was a purpose, a way to stay connected to Emily's world as she struggled. Through her college years, Emily's working so hard. "Maybe this helps a little with her tuition or groceries," Margaret would say, not to seek praise, but simply to express the joy she felt in helping her family. In any way she could. She'd pull out her battered bank book from her canvas purse, hand it to the teller, and after the transfer watch as the teller stamped the record with a rubber stamp, signifying the month's duty done. "I hope this month's transfer went through just fine," she'd murmur, nodding to herself, wanting always to be a grandmother Emily could be proud of. For Margaret, the act of giving was more than a habit. It was a thread that tied her to her family, a living, breathing proof that she still mattered. That there was something only she, with all her years, could provide. Now, Margaret wasn't alone in her trust. Her only son, Michael, was her rock. Michael, 50, ran a small real estate agency just outside the city proper. A hard-working man, known for his steady calm and reliability both at home and at work. "Mom, you shouldn't bother yourself with bank slips and numbers anymore. Let me take care of that," he'd said 5 years prior. Not long after a minor fall left, Margaret worried about getting around so much. She'd hesitated at first. She'd always been careful with her money. But Michael's genuine concern was impossible to resist. Eventually, she handed him her checkbook and credit card, trusting him to manage her finances. Since then, Margaret had lived on the cash Michael brought her at the start of each month, and if she needed extra for groceries or doctor visits, she just asked, and he'd withdraw it for her. "He's a good son, always worrying about his old mother," she'd say, her tone firm with the deep, bone-deep trust that only a mother has in her only child. About every couple of months, Michael would stop by to check in on her, share a meal, and bring little gifts. He'd fuss in his way. "Mom, are you eating right? Are you keeping warm? Do you need anything from the store?" Each question felt like a hug, comforting Margaret on days when the walls of the apartment seemed to close in a little too tightly. Margaret knew she was lucky. She'd lost her husband, yes. Sometimes her knees hurt. Sometimes her breath came a little short when the air was damp. But she had Michael. And she had Emily. That was worth more than anything she could buy, or so she believed. Margaret's gentle faith in people, especially family, meant she rarely questioned things. She hadn't checked her bank book or verified the money transfers in years. "I'm too old for all that fuss," she'd laugh. "Let the young folks handle it." No one ever challenged her on this. But, as fate so often does, life conspired to unravel her quiet confidence in ways she never could have imagined. The first hint that something was amiss came almost by accident, in the casual way that important things sometimes surface. One afternoon, while Emily stirred brownie batter in Margaret's kitchen, practicing her baking for a potluck at college, she said quietly, "Grandma, I'm really grateful for everything you do, but, I haven't gotten the tuition money this month." Margaret's hand hovered in midair. "What do you mean? I've been sending it every month." "Are you sure?" Emily nodded, twisting a strand of hair behind her ear. "I thought maybe I'd missed something, but it's been a couple of months now. And the name on the payment looks different, too. I got a notice from the college, actually. They say my account is overdue." For the first time, a cold, unfamiliar flutter crept into Margaret's chest. It was only a sliver of doubt, but it planted itself deep, making her heart beat a little faster. She brushed it off, telling herself not to worry. Maybe it was just a mistake, and Michael would take care of it. But that night, she lay awake a long time, watching the moon creep across the living room floor, wondering when kindness turned into something else entirely. Weeks later, on a Saturday in April, Margaret finished her grocery run at the corner store, a bag of ripe spring asparagus, fresh collard greens, and a pack of chocolate cupcakes for Emily, who was coming to dinner that night. She heaved her groceries up the 3 flights of stairs and was greeted by Emily's cheerful voice from the kitchen. "Grandma, you're back," Emily said, sporting one of the old aprons from Margaret's own college days, dicing vegetables carefully for the stew. "I just wanted to stop by on my way home from class," she said shyly. "I missed your face, I guess." For a while, that kitchen was filled with the low hum of laughter, good food, and simple shared comfort. It felt just like the world Margaret had carefully built, solid, loving, unchanging. But after dinner, as they shared mugs of herbal tea at the neatly set table, Emily's words sliced through to peace. "Grandma, can I ask you something?" "It's been bothering me for a while." Margaret smiled gently. "Anything at all?" Emily hesitated, fiddling with her spoon. Before her voice broke the silence, "It's about the tuition. I got another letter from the school, and the payments, I keep thinking maybe there's been a mix-up. The deposits look like they're coming from someone else, not you." Margaret's heart pounded, the seeds of worry blossoming into a sharp, unignorable anxiety. "That can't be right. I haven't missed a single month, not in years," she insisted, her voice wavering for the first time in longer than she could remember. Emily shook her head sadly, sliding the envelope from her bag across the table. "See for yourself, Grandma. I didn't want to worry you, but I didn't know who else to ask." The name on the transfer was unfamiliar, and the balance was painfully smaller than Margaret had ever intended. Margaret's hands began to tremble, not from age, but from the simple, jarring shock of a family truth wearing thin. From that moment, the illusion of Margaret's perfectly managed world began to unravel, slowly at first, unseen, like a crack working its way through old plaster. Margaret could feel it every time she tried to smile, every time she sorted her medication, every time she looked at Michael's face, now shadowed by that nagging, horrible worry that something, somewhere, was very wrong. Trust, when it shatters, doesn't always make a sound. Sometimes it simply changes the shape of a day, or leaves a question ringing in the air long after everyone else has left the table. In the growing chasm between what Margaret knew and what she feared, a new season was about to begin. The sunrise promised change, or at least answers. She would need to find the courage to look, at last, for the truth hidden within the silence. Certainly for the past few years, I'd left everything about managing my bank account to my son. He'd said, It's too risky for an older person to use the ATM, so I'd handed over my checkbook and bank card without a second thought. Even so, I never actually doubted Michael's word when he assured me, every month without fail, I sent it along, Mom. But had he really sent it every time, just as he claimed? That late spring night, after Emily had gone home, I sat alone at my low kitchen table, the room settling into a hush around me. Carefully, I pulled out an old canvas organizer from the back of my closet, the one that still held the old bankbook stubs from years ago. There on the fading pages were the records I'd kept before Michael took over. My pension coming in, the bills I paid, utilities, groceries, a note beside each tuition payment sent off to Emily. Everything was noted by hand, as neat as I could manage, a habit from a lifetime of checking and double-checking. Each line was a memory, a life steady and secure, as long as I was the one holding on to the numbers. Back then, I checked every little thing, didn't I? The words slipped out, barely a whisper. When the sun rose, the worry still pressed at me, heavier than any of my old aches. So, after breakfast, I decided it was time to visit the bank for the first time in years. At the counter, I gave my son's full name. The teller, polite and gentle, explained, "You're listed under his management on your account, ma'am. We'll need your son present for any detailed requests." I tried to argue, but it was no use. There was nothing more they could show me. So, I called Michael from the little plastic bench in the bank's entryway, my hands trembling so much I kept nearly missing the right buttons. "Michael, honey, can I ask you something about my account?" His voice on the other end was warm and steady. Too steady. The way people sound when they've given this answer many times before. "Hey, Mom, what's going on? Something got you worried?" "Not really, but, well, Emily said she hasn't been getting the money for her tuition lately. I only ever wanted to help. I thought I'd been sending it every month. Is something wrong?" There was a pause, a catch, barely noticeable if you weren't listening for it. And then he answered, a bit too fast, a bit too bright. "It's fine, Mom, really. Just a timing thing, nothing more. Actually, I started using some of your account for an investment. You wouldn't believe the deal I found. I promise it'll pay off for you. I only moved part of the money, and it's all for your benefit in the long run." "An investment?" I repeated the word, tasting it like a foreign coin. "Yeah, your account still had about 140,000, right? I just moved about 105, zeros on, into a good investment. No need to worry, Mom. It'll probably double before too long. 105 grand. That was the nest egg I'd built across my whole life. My lifeline for old age, the last big piece of John I had left in this world. "You didn't ask me first?" He gave a little laugh. "Aw, Mom, you've always hated numbers and paperwork. You said so yourself. It's better to let someone with experience handle these things. That's all, trust me." His voice was the same soothing tone that once upon a time had choked back my fears, but now, each word echoed in my chest, hollow and chilling, as though we weren't even in the same room. After the call ended, I sank deep into my old armchair and closed my eyes. I could almost see Michael, years ago, smiling as he cleared the dinner table, not a hint of deception in those blue eyes. And yet, the worry on Emily's face, the bank teller's careful words, the reality that 105,000 could just disappear. Those worries snapped together in my mind, like pieces of a silent, painful puzzle. Can I really trust him? The room gave me no answer. But somewhere inside, a steady resolve most certainly began to grow. It wasn't about anger or blame. I just needed to know the truth, simple as that. I'd have to see it with my own eyes. May 15th, 2024. A pale spring dusk hung over Philadelphia, the day holding on to a hint of warmth. Margaret Mitchell stood in her little kitchen, pouring her care into each dish for a family dinner. Tonight, the whole Mitchell family was coming together again at her place. Michael, his wife Susan, and their daughter Emily would all sit down at her table. It was the first time in a long while, and Margaret felt the old mix of nerves and pride in her chest. "I'd better make sure it turns out just right tonight." She stirred her pot roast, gave the gravy a thoughtful taste, and added a pinch more black pepper. She shut off the burner under the miso soup. No, just vegetable soup, she reminded herself, and set everything in place. Just as she smoothed the tablecloth, the doorbell chimed. "Mom, evening. Thank you for, well, having us. This all looks amazing." Michael came in, grinning wide, followed closely by Susan with a plate of brownies and Emily wrestling out of her jacket. Seeing the three of them standing together in her tiny apartment, Margaret's own smile came easily. "We're all here now. Come on, sit down, let's eat while it's hot." The table was crowded with her pot roast, a tray of fried chicken, Emily's favorite, some sautéed greens, and a bowl of Susan's homemade coleslaw. It had the feeling of a little holiday, a celebration built not of special dates, but of togetherness. "Let's give thanks." Their voices blended and the meal began. At first, the conversation was easy and cheerful. Catching up, sharing school news, stories from work, the plain and precious business of family. But for Margaret, one phrase kept flickering beneath the surface. Emily's mention of missing tuition, Michael's talk of investments. If it was all above board, she would find relief. But if there was some deception, if silence let something unspoken fester, then maybe this meal would be the last time all four of them might sit together like this. Margaret set her fork down and looked, first at Emily, then at the others. "Can I ask something?" The air contracted just a little, but enough to notice. "Emily, honey, that $100 I send every month, did it come through all right? Are you staying on top of your tuition?" In a heartbeat, every sound at the table seemed to vanish. Laughter stopped, utensils stilled, the question hanging there, exposed and gentle but heavy with meaning. Emily's eyes went wide in surprise. What?" As that single word left her lips, Margaret's gaze slid to Michael. "I'm sorry to bring it up so suddenly. It's just been on my mind," she said, her usual calm not wavering. But beneath that, her determination shone through clear. A bead of sweat appeared on Michael's forehead, plain as day. He darted his eyes away, searching for an answer he hadn't prepared, his mouth clamped shut. At that moment, Susan, flustered, dropped her fork with a clatter loud enough to make everyone flinch. "Oh, sorry," she mumbled, bending down to fetch it, her hands shaking. Ignoring his wife's distraction, Michael forced himself to respond. "Mom, what are you talking about? Of course I'm sending it every month," he blurted. A little too fast, his tone pitched just a notch higher than usual. "Is that so? Then Emily, you got it just fine." Margaret tried to keep her voice steady, inviting, offering a way for Emily to speak plainly. Emily looked down at her plate, silent, her hair hiding her eyes. Margaret leaned in gently. "Don't worry about being polite, honey. Grandma just wants to know the truth. That's all." Slowly, the air in the room got heavier, the smiles faded away. Michael's voice grew sharper. "Mom, you're not as young as you once were. Your memory's not as good. I already told you, I'm sending the money." Those words hit Margaret like a cold wind. She narrowed her eyes, pressing her hand to her lips. She remembered the years of trust, the quiet routines, the easy love that had tied her whole family together, and wondered, for the first time in her life, what came next when trust itself went missing from her table. "I suppose, perhaps you're right. I guess it's possible I just didn't pay close enough attention." "I am getting on in years," Margaret said, her words floating gently across the table, soft and almost soothing. For just a moment, a hint of relief flickered over her son Michael's face. The tension in the room thinned, as if they'd all been granted a brief, unexpected reprieve. But then, you know, I actually went to the bank last week," she continued, her tone still mild but edged with something quiet and firm. That single sentence landed with a weight that brought the strained hush back, for everyone in the room. "When I got there, the teller told me they couldn't show me anything unless the account manager, that would be you, Michael, was present," Margaret explained, choosing her words carefully. "It made me a little nervous, if I'm being honest." With that, she reached under the side table and drew out a small gray laptop 1. she hadn't touched since Michael had once dismissed computers as way too complicated for older folks. It still had a tiny sticker on the lid from when Emily, her granddaughter, patiently helped her reboot it just a few weeks ago. With Emily's guidance, Margaret had learned how to set up her online banking and check her account herself. "So," Margaret said as she gingerly opened the laptop, "I decided to take a look at my accounts online. I wanted to see the recent activity for myself." She clicked through her banking homepage and then set the screen squarely in the middle of the kitchen table, inviting everyone to see. Rows of dates and figures glimmered on the monitor, 6 months of bank statements, each line neat, clear, and unambiguous. There was no record whatsoever of any transfers to Emily during the last half year. No one spoke. The silence was thick and final. Margaret let the moment linger, then spoke again, her hand steady, her voice almost clinical. "And there's something else. This one? Well, a friend of mine happened to mention it, and I just had to check," she murmured. Next, she pulled out a printed piece of paper. The seal and letterhead belonged to a reputable real estate agency, and the copy showed Margaret Mitchell's name scrawled on the signature line at the bottom. A buyer's contract for an investment condominium. A large figure, approx. US $105,000 was written on the sale price line. "I never signed this contract. Not once," she declared. She held the paper up so everyone could see the signature, so reminiscent of her own script, yet not hers. "For the record, my real signature looks like this," she said, taking out an old insurance form with her unmistakable, careful signature in broad navy ink to compare. "And there's one more thing," Margaret continued, reaching into a plain envelope. She withdrew a glossy photo. There was Michael, her only son, beaming for the camera, holding up a key in front of a sleek, black new car faintly reflecting a red and blue dealership balloon arch. She tapped the bottom of the picture. "Take a look at the purchase date," Margaret said, holding a dealer's invoice up beside the photo. "That's the very same day the $105,000 was withdrawn from my account." Now all the evidence lay on the table in the stale evening air, each item more damning than the last. The silence in the kitchen had grown so heavy that it seemed almost alive. Margaret looked straight at Michael, her voice never rising above a gentle, everyday tone. "Michael, do you think of me as nothing but your own personal bank vault?" She didn't shout. Her words didn't tremble or crack. Her voice was soft, painfully quiet. But that terrible, unwavering calmness seemed to pierce the air far more deeply than any argument. "I wonder now, what have I spent my life believing in? What was it that I tried so hard all these years to protect?" It wasn't tears that filled Margaret's eyes, but a question one edged with both love and heartbreak. So genuine, so quietly devastating that it left everyone at the table unable to respond. That night, the little dining area was shrouded by a chill, the kind that makes laughter and conversation seem like distant memories. From the moment Margaret laid out the truth, one, then another, none of them could find even a single word. The clatter of forks, the hum of conversation, even the warmth of shared smiles. All those ordinary sounds faded, and for a spell, time itself seemed to stop in Margaret's old Philadelphia apartment. It was Michael, her only son, who finally broke the dreadful silence. Mom, enough already." His voice was rougher than she remembered, a little broken, a little desperate, like a cornered animal lashing out. "What are you trying to do here, in front of the family? Are you just here to humiliate me? Mom, you're not as sharp as you used to be. Maybe you've just gotten a few things mixed up." He tried to sound confident, but his words wavered. He kept his eyes low, his jaw clenched so tightly it looked painful. Margaret, with her eyes narrowed, slowly stood. Calmly, she turned the laptop screen back toward the others and set it in the center of the table, beside the printed papers and the glossy photo. "Michael, some things can't just be dismissed as a mistake." Her voice was quiet, but the conviction behind it was sharper than thunder, washing through the room. "In the last 6 months, no money at all was sent for Emily's tuition. I checked each record myself. It's right here in front of us." She pointed to the highlighted lines on the bank statement, the empty rows where tuition payments should have appeared. A tidy parade of red check marks. And this contract, with my name on it. I never signed anything for some kind of real estate investment. Yet I see here, clear as day, 105,000 coming out of my account. And this signature? That isn't mine. Something seemed to snap inside Michael. Mom. All right, yes, but I did it for you, okay? I put the money in the investment for your sake. You can't count on just your Social Security. With prices going up, you'll never have enough for retirement. I was only trying to help, put it somewhere safe so you'd have more in the future. Why can't you just believe me? Why do you have to doubt your own son? His words tumbled out louder and faster until frenzy replaced pride. But all the loudness in the world could not bury the plain, hard truth spread out on that kitchen table. Michael. Margaret's voice was gentle, almost affectionate, but it changed the air in the room all over again. If you had truly been worried for my future, she said, her face etched with pain and patience, you'd have spoken to me, even just once. You would have let me decide for myself what to do with my own money. Michael bit his lip and turned his head, unable to meet her gaze. You moved my life savings around, signed contracts using my name and never even asked. Yet you call it for my sake? All I hear are excuses. Her eyes, when she looked up at him, were sad, but also clear and steady. Then, quietly, she continued, holding up the photo of Michael in front of his new car and the dealer invoice. And this car? Well, was that for me too? No one dared reply. In that moment, Susan, Michael's wife, quietly set her fork down, her hands trembling. She stood, wiped her eyes, and left the kitchen without a word. Emily turned away too, silent as the tears slid down her face. Margaret released a long, slow breath and settled back into her chair. I'm not trying to blame you, Michael, she said softly. I just want to understand something. Did the bond I believed in, the love between a mother and her son, mean the same thing to you that it did to me? Michael did not answer. His shoulders shook and his fists clenched tight in his lap. Money can be lost. Sometimes there's nothing to be done about that. But trust, real trust, once you break it, you can never get it back. Not really. Margaret sank quietly into her seat and gazed at the small shelf. On the far side of the room, where her late husband's photo sat among a few faded roses. John, I'm sorry. I never dreamed it would come to this. Even from behind, the dignity in her posture was unmistakable, frail and yet, somehow, unbreakable. That night, the old apartment that was usually so warm with family chatter, echoed with nothing but silence. Each member of the Mitchell family retreated to their own corners, keeping their pain close in the sleepless dark. But, deep in Margaret's heart, something else took shape, a steady, unmistakable resolve. From here on out, I must put everything in order. To love doesn't always mean only holding close. Sometimes it means stepping back. To regain trust, the first step is to face the truth, no matter how hard. Believing this, Margaret began quietly preparing for the next chapter. Her hands, moving with new certainty, her spirit clear. After the uneasy silence returned to the room, Margaret slowly rose from her chair and made her way into the kitchen. She moved with a kind of careful resolve, reaching for her favorite mug, the same one that bore the faded fingerprint, marks left behind by years of tea and comfort. She filled the kettle, waiting patiently as the water heated, then poured herself a steaming cup of chamomile tea, the scent drifting up around her in soothing curls. No words passed her lips as she did it, the motions themselves seemed ritual, something steady to hold on to while her heart tried to make sense of the churning inside. After a moment, while the others sat in the living room, Margaret's quiet voice floated back. You know, this mug? Emily, do you remember who made it? Her granddaughter looked up, surprised, blinking away the remnants of tears. Margaret gazed softly at the worn, slightly misshapen handle. Your father made this when he was in elementary school. He brought it home from art class, with "to Mom" scribbled on a scrap of paper tucked inside. She traced the small ridge where the handle joined the cup. a bit crooked, but shaped with a child's love. There was a world of memory in Margaret's face. I held onto it every day. I thought, my son truly grew up to be gentle and kind. I was proud. So proud, Michael. But Michael sat with his head bowed, shoulders slumped, unable or unwilling to meet his mother's eyes. Margaret's voice was not angry. If anything, it was gentler than ever, though it trembled with a heavy weight. I don't want to hate you. I truly don't. But, Michael, what you chose was not the car or the contract, or even just the money. You chose to deceive your own mother for profit. Her words hung, quiet but sure, the reckoning of years and love stretched to breaking. She looked at her son. When your father died, you told me, from now on, I'll protect you, Mom. I promise. Unnoticed by everyone, her granddaughter, Emily, lifted her head, her tear-wet cheeks and red-rimmed eyes catching the light. Margaret smiled faintly, nostalgia and ache entwined. That promise, it kept me going these past 25 years. Whenever I wondered how I'd live on, I thought of your words. You gave me hope to carry on. But now, I don't know what to believe in anymore. I'm not angry, Michael. Right now, I feel nothing but a deep, deep sadness. In the quiet that followed, Emily, her voice barely above a whisper, managed, Grandma, I'm sorry. I should have come to you sooner. I was too afraid, but I'm glad I trusted you. Margaret crossed the short space between them and folded Emily's hands inside her own. That warmth, so real in a room full of broken promises, felt, for a moment, like the only thing that had not changed. As Margaret brushed a strand of gray from her eyes, she noticed movement beyond the window. Wisps of clouds had begun drifting across the distant sky with a gentle wind, stirring the curtain. Spring rain was surely coming. The air shifted, soft and cool. Only the seasons, she thought, continue on unchanged. The family, which once had seemed so solid, now felt itself quietly crumbling away. But somewhere deep inside, Margaret made herself a promise. This will not be where it ends, she murmured, voice firm but gentle. It was not a vow of revenge, but a step toward something new. A kind of life again. A way to protect herself and Emily, to build trust from the ground up. Later that night, after gathering each bit of evidence together, emails, bank printouts, the real estate contract, the car purchase, her own scrawled notes, Margaret placed them in a large manila envelope. She set it aside, then opened a desk drawer and withdrew a letter, yellowed with age and soft at the edges. It was the last letter her late husband John had ever written, short, loving, the handwriting shaky but sure. To Margaret, if you ever find yourself lost or doubting, don't always choose what you want to believe. Instead, choose what you can see. Look with your eyes. Trust your heart. Decide for yourself. As long as you choose that way, you'll never be truly wrong. She traced her fingers over those words, a single tear dropping, unhidden, onto the old paper. Softly to the empty room she said, I think, John, I finally understand what you meant. And when she sealed the envelope shut, her hands no longer trembled. The following morning, Margaret rose with the first light, following the same quiet rituals she'd kept for years, splashing water onto her face, pausing at the little shelf where she kept John's old photo palms folded, silent for a prayer. Today, please watch over me, she whispered. The words came calmly, but inside her a steady resolve took root. Breakfast was simple, plain toast, hot oatmeal, a spoonful of applesauce. Margaret ate slowly and with care, gathering her resolve as much as her strength. Then, tucking the manila envelope into her battered purse, she drew in a long, steadying breath and slipped out the front door. Today, it was facts, not feelings, that she would carry forward. Her first stop was the nearest police station, a square brick building nestled beside a small city park. At the counter, she gave her name, Margaret Mitchell, and requested a private conversation. I'd like to report some concerns about financial abuse of an elderly person, she told the receptionist. The officer who greeted her maintained a polite calm, but as Margaret produced her evidence, one sheet at a time, his face stiffened from courtesy to concern. He flipped through each bank statement and forged document, reviewing dates and signatures alongside the purchase receipts. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I want to say I know this is extremely difficult, but what you're presenting here does fit the pattern for elder financial exploitation. I'll be referring this for formal investigation by our department." Margaret nodded, quietly grateful but calm, her dignity intact. "I don't want to press charges for revenge. I just need the world to know the truth and to put my affairs in order. That's all." The officer offered her a chair to rest, and for a moment, Margaret simply sat, the years of sorrow and determination resting calmly on her shoulders. No longer just a mother, now an individual, deserving of respect in her own right. After leaving the station, she made her way to the offices of a family law attorney. There, she sat down and described what she wanted, her voice steady. "I'd like to put an asset management trust into place," she told the attorney. "And I want to restrict withdrawals from my account, except for people I name myself. I need to make sure my savings and property are passed to my granddaughter, Emily." The attorney, a kindly middle-aged woman, nodded in understanding. "Mrs. Mitchell, these steps are hard, but you're doing the right thing. Your wishes and your security matter most. Leave everything to us, we'll take care, start to finish." "Thank you," Margaret replied. "Emily's the only one I want to show what it means to do what's right, even when no one's watching." For her, it was not only a matter of money, it was about honesty, and the hope that her granddaughter might carry a stronger spirit into the next generation. On the way home, Margaret found herself lingering beneath the community bulletin board that stood by the entrance to her senior apartment complex. She dug into her purse and carefully pulled out 3 handwritten flyers. She pinned them to the board, making sure there was nothing crooked about the tape or the wording. "Apartment for sale. Mitchell home, 50 years old. Price, 1. Condition, must be purchased by someone truly devoted to their parents. Contact, Margaret Mitchell. Interview required." What might seem a joke to others, Margaret meant with every ounce of her heart. A passing neighbor stopped, curious, then squinted at the flyer, eyebrows raised. Murmurs drifted around, folks whispering among themselves. Still, Margaret gave them a kind, steady nod and continued on her way. "After all," she mused quietly as she walked away, "there's not much in this world that can really be measured by money." Clouds gathered overhead. The wind carried the promise of spring rain through the old city streets. Yet Margaret's steps were light. Her heart, though scarred, felt strong. The family she'd once known might be changed forever. But trust, lost and rebuilt, was a legacy she could shape on her own terms and, perhaps, in time, offer to Emily as the very best inheritance of all. The voice that uttered that line felt almost like a breeze itself, passing gently by, as if it had brushed softly across the heart of somebody hurrying down the street, leaving behind a trace you might not even notice until it had gone. That evening, her granddaughter arrived to visit. "Grandma, I just saw this on the news, 1-bedroom apartment for sale price. $1? Grandma, this can't be your place, can it?" Margaret Mitchell offered a small, wry smile and gave her a gentle nod. "Yes, sweetheart, that's me. Maybe it's a little mischief for the last chapter of my life." Emily stared at her, stunned into silence. Her mouth parted just so as if she was searching for the right words. After a moment, she exhaled with a tiny, unsteady breath. "Grandma, you're really something." Margaret extended a warm mug of tea to Emily, her hand steady, her manner calm. "I don't need to leave behind any big pile of money," Margaret said quietly. "That was never the goal. I only ever wanted to leave something that mattered, a feeling or a thought or a bit of love. Money can shrink after all, but our hearts, as long as there's someone willing to receive them, what we give just keeps growing." Those words brought a shimmer of tears to Emily's eyes, making them shine in the soft kitchen light. She reached across the table and took Margaret's hand, squeezing tightly before lowering her head in gratitude for a long, quiet moment. "Thank you," Emily whispered. "Thank you truly." The dinner they shared that night was the simplest kind, just scrambled eggs, vegetable soup, and steaming bowls of fresh cooked white rice. Nothing fancy, nothing rich, but the laughter that bubbled around the old table, the bright gleam in Emily's eyes, the gentle hush between courses, those spoke of something deeper than warmth, a feeling of hearts, full and at rest. Quietly, gently, the first true day of Margaret Mitchell's sorting out her work to put her life and memory in order had begun. That night, for the first time in years, Margaret crawled all the way to the back of her closet and pulled out an old photo album. Yellowed, thick with pages, the cover bore just her initials. She turned each page with care, and every photo her as a young woman, Margaret and John's black and white wedding photo, little Kenji No, little Michael in her arms in the hospital waiting room. Each one slightly faded, but every one radiating memory and that same golden warmth. You were such a good boy once. So honest, always laughing. Margaret found herself whispering those words to a picture, tracing the image of a gap-toothed little boy in suspenders waving a toy fire truck in the air. She wasn't entirely sure who the words belonged to, a young Michael, or maybe even the Margaret Mitchell she'd been all those decades ago, full of faith and hope. If I'd only scolded you harder back then, if I'd told you, truly, that some things matter more than money, would it have changed anything at all? Her gentle confession was swallowed by the quiet hush of her home. The words slipping away into the shadows of late night. Sitting at her desk, Margaret saw there was still one envelope she'd prepared, but not yet used documents she'd filled out that afternoon, getting ready for the next day's mission. The forms would let her switch her banking from the national megabank where Michael had once had access, over to the local credit union, the small 1-2 miles up the road, where they knew her face and remembered her. Favorite scone order. No more letting someone else hold the keys to everything, Margaret whispered. From now on, I'll look after myself again. Nobody else's responsibility, just mine. Her hand wobbled as she picked up her pen, but that day, as she signed her name on the line, Margaret pressed so firmly that each swirl of ink seemed to declare, "This is mine. I choose this." When morning came, Margaret walked to the neighborhood credit union, the cool taste of spring on the air. The clerk greeted her at the window, carefully confirming her name. "Mrs. Mitchell, thank you for coming in," the teller said, respect clear in her voice. "We're here to help you with anything you need. Whatever you need, you can trust us." Margaret found herself smiling, small but true. "I'd like to try trusting the distance between people again," she answered. "That's all I ask." All the paperwork was done quietly. The clerk handed her the fresh passbook with her new account, and as Margaret smoothed her hand across the thick paper, she found herself sighing out a sense of closure. Something had settled, just a little, in her heart. On the walk home, passing the edge of the local park, she paused. From across the playground came the bright voices of children. "Grandma, lift me up!" The call made Margaret stop and look. A young mother stood, beams wide, lifting her toddler into her arms, the child gurgling with laughter. Margaret watched, quiet and still for a long moment. She remembered days not so long ago. Her own John, lifting little Michael, not despite the ache in his old shoulder, but because that's what fathers and mothers do. Even when the years stretch out, even as some memories turn soft around the edges and grow harder to retrieve, the core, the feeling of warmth and of care remained, untouchable, tucked away safe. "I'm not finished. I'm still here," Margaret told herself silently. And with that, her footsteps grew light again, almost as though someone she loved had leaned in and nudged her forward on her way home. A week slipped by. On the surface, not a thing had changed. Margaret began each morning in her quiet way, sitting by John's photo, murmuring a gentle prayer. In the afternoons, she walked to the little grocery down on the avenue. Evenings were for a cup of tea and a favorite book. But underneath the smallest shift had transformed every part of her routine. Margaret's quiet now wasn't loneliness, nor surrender. The silence she drifted through was something else, a peace that came from standing up on her own, from starting over for herself. But just as a pond's surface calm can't hide its shifting currents, new things started happening all around her. One sleepy afternoon, the phone rang. The name flashed across the caller ID, and Margaret hesitated, her hand hovering mid-air, heart squeezing in her chest. She took a deep breath, picked up the receiver, and answered with practiced calm. "Hello, this is Margaret Mitchell." The voice on the other end was hesitant, uncertain, but something urgent flickered underneath. "Mom, do you have a minute?" It was Michael. Margaret said nothing for a beat, waiting. I lost my job. Actually, I got fired, Mom. On Monday, everything came out. The company, well, there was an anonymous report. About the account and the investment, Margaret scarcely breathed as her son's words ran dry. She did not interrupt, only listened, steady, impossible to read. "They called me in, said I'd broken trust as an executive. Just that, and then I had to clear out my desk." Michael's voice, once sure, steady, always in control, sounded thin, lost, like a child trying hard not to cry. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I really am." Margaret spoke with the same quiet strength she'd found the night Emily visited. "If you're only calling to apologize, to ask me for forgiveness alone, you don't need to call again. If you truly want to make amends, you'll have to build your life back, piece by piece, with your own two hands. I can't do that for you." Her tone held no anger, nor any hint of accusation, only a mother's final prayer, a hope that he might choose something better for himself this time. A long hush followed. Michael's breath caught, the silence of a son absorbing, at last, the full weight of having hurt someone who loved him most. "I understand," he managed finally, and the line went dead. A few days later, more difficult news arrived. This time, it was not Michael directly, but a neighbor who reported that Michael's wife had left him, under pressure from car payments, bills, and debts. Their marriage had ebbed away. The last words she'd said were, "There's no reason to stay together anymore," and the front door had shut behind her. Hearing this, Margaret returned to her apartment, feet heavy, and knelt silently in front of the small shelf where John's picture stood. She folded her hands, pressing her forehead into her knuckles. "Maybe, until now, I chose not to see what was clearly happening right in front of me. But the feeling that rose wasn't victory. It was grief. A parent's sorrow so deep it required no words, as if her tears were shared across generations, across time. And yet, when old life falls away, so too does something new spring forth. One soft evening, Emily arrived at Margaret's door, a small envelope clutched in her hands. She waited on the porch, where the light from the kitchen window glowed, where the promise of generations echoed in every wooden floorboard and along every fading memory. Margaret opened the door, and the night the story continued, a little heavier, yes, but with hope, real and shining, burning steady inside the Mitchell family's little home. "Grandma, look, here, take a look at this." Emily's voice rang with a shy excitement as she stepped through the front door, fidgeting with a crisp envelope she'd just opened. Margaret, standing at her sideboard arranging a vase of spring tulips, turned and watched, gentle curiosity in her gaze. Inside that envelope, a letter printed on thick, official stationery from Lincoln State University, complete with a blue-inked seal and lines of careful, dignified type. Margaret's hands shook, just a touch, as she unfolded the letter. She smoothed it across the kitchen table and began to read aloud, her eyes squinting a little in the soft golden light. After a comprehensive review of the applicant's academic achievements, personal character, and community contributions, the Scholarship Committee is pleased to award you our highest honor. Your full tuition will be waived, and you are hereby granted a living stipend for the duration of your studies. She read the words once, then again tracing them with the tip of her finger, as if she was afraid the ink might fade beneath her touch. Tears filled her eyes, unashamed and glistening, as Margaret smiled, her pride bright as the morning sun. "Oh, honey. How wonderful. How wonderful. Oh, Emily, I'm so proud of you. I really am." Emily flushed, a pink warming her cheeks. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and offered a sheepish smile. "Actually, Grandma, I should tell you during the selection process, they asked us to submit an essay, Emily's voice was soft, almost uncertain. The topic was, the person you respect most in your life. So I wrote about you. She met her grandmother's gaze for a moment, love and gratitude shining in her eyes, before looking down. Margaret's hands rose without thinking. She covered her mouth, holding back a new wave of tears, and then reached over the kitchen table, her old, sturdy hands finding Emily's and holding them tight. If anything I've done in my life helps you step out into the world a little lighter, Emily, that alone makes me the happiest grandmother there can be. The next hour melted away in a soft haze, a grandmother and granddaughter. Side by side in their small Philadelphia kitchen, hands clasped, hearts full. After a while, Margaret moved quietly to a corner of the room, to the old mahogany bookshelf where her keepsakes lived. She reached up for a particular frame, dusted carefully every week, and brought down a white cardstock mount. She set it gently on the table between them. Inside the frame, a single, old-fashioned replica bill, made from thick craft paper and printed $100, a gift Emily had made in high school from her very first after-school job, tucking it inside a handmade card she'd scribbled on. For Grandma, a thank you. My very first step in paying you back. Margaret smiled, her lips trembling, as Emily traced the tiny, earnest lettering with a fingertip. See, Emily? Margaret's voice was soft but certain. There are treasures in this world that weigh more, far more than any bank account. This one here? It means more to me than any statement in my life. Emily's answer was a quiet, heartfelt laugh. Then a deep bow, her gratitude overflowing. Thank you, Grandma. Thank you for everything. I want to be the kind of person who gives back. Too, who keeps the promise to return every act of kindness someone's given me. Outside, the fading spring sunlight slipped through the window and traced the edges of their shadows along the kitchen floor. The golden hush of dusk spread through the room, blending their voices into a single, gentle memory that would linger long after night fell. In that hush, another thought glimmered. Part memory, part promise. Don't let broken things fill you with anger. Hold tightly instead to what remains, what still can be loved. That was the path Margaret had chosen, day by gentle day. And by her open-hearted way of living, she'd begun to pass a new strength onto Emily. A pattern of love, trust, and hope, handed forward to another generation. As the months rolled by, August came with its lazy, hazy warmth giving way to the first hints of autumn. Leaves along the sidewalk behind Margaret's apartment building began shifting, from green to gold. Outside, the wind clicked the branches of the old oak at the corner each afternoon, promising the coming change. Margaret's world, once shaken to its core, found a steady rhythm again. Peace grew in the pockets of each day. Her worries, for the first time in years, shrinking into the background. She woke each morning before the alarm, her body so set in the pattern of early rising. In the quiet kitchen, she boiled water for her tea, sipped it slowly, and set aside a small piece of toast. Then, pausing to stand before her old sideboard where John's photograph lived, and a single white candle still burned, she pressed her hands together in silent prayer. Let today be a simple, safe day, she whispered. Not a prayer for anyone else, but a gentle moment to re-center herself, to steady her heart and bear witness to a life still unfolding. A new rhythm had arrived for Margaret, one that made space for beginnings. 3 times each week, she walked to the neighborhood children's community center. There, in a bright, sun-filled room decorated with construction paper crafts, she led the old-fashioned sweets workshop, showing kids how to make simple, homemade treats. Today's lesson: creamy, sweet potato bars. Margaret smiled as she moved from table to table, explaining how to mash the potatoes just right so every slice turned out smooth and velvety. If you cook the sweet potatoes well and mash them carefully, the bars come out soft and melt in your mouth, she told them, her voice gentle but lively. A half-dozen kids gathered around, eyes wide with curiosity, hands sticky with sugar. Laughter bubbled up as someone tasted a spoonful from the bowl. Miss Margaret, can I make these at home with my mom? Of course you can. I wrote up the whole recipe here. Give it a try, and bring me a sample next time. Margaret replied, slipping a folded recipe card into the boy's hand and giving him an encouraging nod. Amid the children's busy, cheerful buzz, Margaret sometimes glimpsed echoes of her own earlier days, years spent making slow-cooked meals every Sunday, tending to her late husband or watching her son, Michael, devour second and third helpings. Love, she reflected, doesn't mean fancy gestures. More often, it means something simple, warming someone's belly, brightening someone's spirit. That's enough. Sometimes, that is everything. And Margaret found, after everything she'd lost, after the world she trusted had crumbled and rebuilt itself, this was the truth. Now shining through, the power of genuine small comforts. One afternoon, as the children's laughter faded behind her, Margaret passed the bulletin board by the community park. There, tacked up among the flyers for pet shows and yard sales, was a row of photocopied essays, the winners of the local "Thank You, My Hero" essay contest for middle and high schoolers. The signature on one essay leapt out at her. "Thank you, Grandma," by Emily Mitchell. Margaret stood there under the turning leaves, reading the hand-lettered page in the cooling autumn air. "I was raised by a single grandmother. She's always been quiet and gentle, but deep down, she's made of steel. She's shown me there are things more important than money, trust, kindness, and the courage to believe in myself all the way to the end. Her hands are small, but to me, she is the biggest presence in my whole world." When Margaret finished, she couldn't hold back the tears. This time, tears of release, of being seen and, at last, fully understood. "Thank you, Emily. Grandma finally feels like all she's given has come back, and then some." That night, Margaret hung up Emily's essay on the wall, just below the frame that held that hand-drawn first paycheck, her most precious keepsake. Beneath them, Margaret added a little handwritten slip in curling black ink. "One day, I'll pay you back. I promise." She gazed at the display, her memory swirling, then whispered, "Emily, you've already given me more than I could ever ask for." Next to that growing little shrine, Margaret added another new sheet. In her own careful script, she penned a message for her family and for anyone who would step into her home. "In days to come, even if money disappears, what we share in our hearts endures. Every act of kindness given freely will eventually return, in one shape or another." It wasn't just a message for Emily. It was for herself and for every guest who saw it. A note for the future, born from the trials of years. As the season pressed further toward November, Margaret found her days a little colder, but her heart still somehow warm. On her morning walks, kids from the neighborhood called out, "Hi, Miss Margaret," their bright voices trailing down the block. Each evening, she heard Emily's cheery, "I'm home," as she bounded up the apartment stairs. Every one of those sounds, every gentle routine that was happiness enough for Margaret Mitchell, she found herself wanting for nothing, content at last in the fullness of her days. One evening, after supper, Emily sat across from Margaret and asked quietly, "Grandma, do you regret anything now?" Margaret set down her fork, sipped her tea, and thought a long time before answering. "No, I don't. Not a single thing. Even if things had played out differently, I know I would have chosen just the same. Because living honestly as a person is the only way I know." Emily nodded, pressing her hand around Margaret's, both of them sharing in the calm that filled the silent, television-free room. Their shadows, cast by the warm lamp above, blended quietly together, a grandmother and granddaughter healing whole side by side. And finally, Margaret turned her gaze out beyond the kitchen, beyond the fading light, her voice carrying not just to Emily, but to all who'd listened this far. "Is there someone you want to thank right now? Sometimes, all it takes is a single thank you. It costs nothing, but it can hold a heart together. The people we love won't always be with us, so tell them how you feel while you can. That might be the greatest family gift of all. My life now is dusk, the long golden hour before night. And like any sunset, there's a deep beauty that colors even the ending." Margaret's words drifted out into the stillness, finding a place in the quiet world her story had built. an invitation for others to see not just what is lost, but what endures and what, with courage and kindness, we each might someday return. May your day, just as it is, become someone's gentle memory. As she spoke those words, her smile was warm and calm, as if weaving a quiet wish into the hush of the evening. Beside her, on the mantel, sat the old picture frame, the one holding Emily's hand-drawn first paycheck, printed carefully on sturdy paper to look like $100 bill. Next to it rested a small card they had made together, a simple slip that read, in looping script, "Words of kindness always return to you. Trust is worth more than gold." The two keepsakes, side by side, one a symbol, the other a promise, seemed to shine in the soft lamplight. They did not speak loudly or demand attention, but their presence lingered, gentle and sure, bearing witness to the journey of lives entwined by hope, disappointment, forgiveness, and love. And rooted in that moment was a lesson carried forward, that each quiet act, a word of encouragement, a memory shared, a hand held during darkness, might travel further than we dare imagine. It could become a silent source of comfort for someone else, long after our voices fade. So the story comes to a close, not with thunder nor with applause, but with a hush of grateful hearts, and a whispered hope that perhaps, in some small way, what we offer today will echo kindly in the days and memories of others. The end.